So this is our very first Next Level Benefits hosted webinar. Next Level Benefits is an HR consulting firm, and we don't just do benefits, we do all things HR. And this is a little bit more about us. So, we're a leading boutique consulting firm. We really appreciate you joining us today. My name's Lauren Winans. I'm the CEO and principal HR consultant of Next Level Benefits. And the best way to describe what we do is we really serve as an on-demand extension of your HR team or of your leadership team. So we spend a lot of our time operating as interim talent as it relates to HR, as it relates to HR leadership. We also help a variety of different HR teams with special projects. We have clients across the country, all sizes, all industries. And so we hope that if you haven't had a chance to take a look at our website, nlbenefits.com, that you do get a chance to take a look and see what we're all about. We are available for project work. But today we're mainly focused on workplace civility. And we're focused on emotional intelligence and how those two interplay together to really help us to foster a respectful workplace. And so Aisha is going to be leading the conversation today. Aisha Ferguson, she is a human resources consultant. She's got over 20 years of HR experience. She specializes in a variety of different things within the HR field, but specifically, I think human capital strategy and talent management are probably her sweet spots. She also does a lot of training and learning and development opportunities, which she's gracing us with that today. And she's also certified, SHRM's senior certified professional. She is a certified practitioner of EQ, as well as predictive index, Myers-Briggs. She's got a wealth of certifications in the HR field. And on top of that, she is a Next Level Benefits consultant. So we're really happy to have Aisha with us today. And I'll turn it over to you, Aisha, to go ahead and get things started.
Okay, thank you so much, Lauren. Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. The thing about Zoom, there's so much good to love about Zoom, but I can't see people or even the boxes sometimes. So I can see you, Lauren. But anyway, I did see in the chat that you all are coming from Wisconsin, Hawaii, I think Connecticut, Pennsylvania. So welcome. Thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day to spend with us. We're so thankful that you're here. And if you can't tell, one of my favorite things to talk about is emotional intelligence and how we can make our workplaces better, more respectful, more inclusive, more civil. We've likely all worked at places where this has been done really well, and we see the results. But we've also probably worked at places where culture isn't at the forefront, and we've seen the results. So before we get into the meat of today's discussion, I want you to think a little bit about 2024. And in the chat, if you would, Lauren's going to monitor that for us. What has the year meant to you? What comes to your mind when you think of this year? There's been a lot, but we want to hear a little bit from you. And so it could be anything. It could be good, bad, positive, something exciting, something not so exciting.
We've got a lot of comments coming in. So we've got change, uncertainty, growth, opportunity. Someone put in there bizarre. I love that. A year of change, stress, fresh starts. I love the optimism here. Management challenges. So we've got a little balance of both, really. We've got, some more challenging, words that come to mind. And we also have opportunity, growth, clarity, fresh starts, learning opportunities, a year of prep for the future.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a little bit of mix of everything, which I think we could expect that, everyone kind of has a different experience every year, right?
Definitely. Well, this year definitely has been full of events, lots of things happening. We've definitely had some highs, though, some exciting things. We've had Taylor Swift Um, those of you in DC, we've had a reason to cheer for our football team for the first time in a very long time. So thank you, Jaden Daniels, for any of you football fans out there. Maybe not so much last night, but we have definitely been celebrating. But we've also had some lows that produce some strong emotions, which overflow into the workplace. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Why are we even talking about workplace civility? What is our collective responsibility? Most of you probably are HR leaders or managers. Maybe you're senior leadership in your company. So what collective responsibility do we have to the people that we work with? And what's our individual responsibility? How can we use emotional intelligence to promote civility in our workforce? And then we're also going to give you some actionable takeaways. So maybe you can start thinking about, as we go through our discussion, what are some things that you can start implementing as soon as possible back into your workplace. And so I wanted to just tell you a little story. I was sitting down with a new employee, and I was working with her to create a learning and development plan for the year. And as we were talking about the different courses that she should take, she said, just don't make me take anything about emotional intelligence. And if you know me, you can imagine my surprise. My eyes must have gotten like so wide. And I'm thinking, why would she say that? Um, but I leaned in and, I asked her, what made you say that? And pretty much what it came down to was, emotional intelligence is just common sense. And I think many people might share those sentiments. But if it were common sense, then we wouldn't need to have this conversation. We wouldn't be having to talk about how we can have a more respectful, more civil workplace. So, like I said earlier, I'm very passionate talking about how we can use our emotional intelligence skills in our everyday lives, personally and professionally. And so now we're going to talk a little bit more about, why we're talking about civility in the first place. Now, civility is defined as demonstrating and maintaining respectful behavior toward one another, even when we disagree. So essentially, it's how we treat each other, which contributes to a workplace that's more productive. People feel that they're heard, they're valued. Civility makes people feel more comfortable, and also, it's been proven that our workplaces will become more productive and everyone can thrive. So SHRM has been doing a lot of research, and this is where this slide comes from, as it relates to civility. And this is one of their leading initiatives for 2024 and 2025, how to create a more civil workforce. So they've recently published their findings. So I'm going to share a little bit with you. The data shows that over half of US workers believe that our society is uncivil, and our workforce collectively experiences 202 million acts of incivility each day. So clearly we see that incivility is on the rise, and it's also costing companies loss of productivity, increased absenteeism, and loss of revenue. Here are a couple more statistics. According to a 2024 SHRM research survey earlier this year, more than half of US workers expected the tension to ratchet even higher as the election was drawing near. And more than a third of workers say that they believe that the November election would trigger additional incivility in the workplace. Another survey by Zeti found that 83% of people say that they've actually discussed politics at work, and 61% of people in a Pew poll said that it's stressful and it's frustrating to have these political discussions with people at work, especially when they disagree. So, as company leaders, we have a balancing act because we have a workforce who's definitely affected by everything that's happening in the world, everything that's happened in the last 12 months. And so how do we manage those emotions that come along and come into our workplace? And how can we manage the emotions and be productive at the same time? So now we're going to talk a little bit about what we can do. How can we spark civility collectively? How can we do it together? So HR professionals and company leadership have a crucial role to play in fostering civility. And so it's recommended that HR leaders, in particular, a lot of this falls on them, get together proactively with senior leadership for difficult conversations. So, how can you do this? Well, lead by example. We can't simply sit back and hope that this issue doesn't flare up in the workplace. So, we have to be willing to address these difficult conversations before they happen. So, many of you have probably been in the workforce for a while and can think back to 2020. Many of us went through this before. In 2020, we were dealing with the height of COVID. We were dealing with the outrage over the murder of George Floyd. And so company leaders, they had to prepare for how are we going to address these huge political and social issues. And so I want you to think back to your own company. How were things handled? Was your company proactive or were they reactive? And as a consultant, I was able to see firsthand what several companies were doing. And some of the ones who were effective, they started at the executive level and they would schedule executive meetings. And in many cases, executive team members were asked to educate themselves on how to discuss racial issues, for instance. And then they just spent time discussing it as a team. In other cases, they used outside facilitators to come in and help them talk about these issues that they weren't prepared to handle. So, in a similar way, we can ask ourselves, how can we get ahead of some of these emotions that are coming into the workplace? Can we bring our leadership team together to talk about how our company is going to manage over the next year? Something also to keep in mind is our workforce. You all have seen, different memes and funny things online that our workforce today is comprised of more generations than ever. And particularly now, the younger generations, they want to work for employers who are socially conscious and socially responsible. So what we found is that when leaders take the time to do this work, employees are watching, and they value it. Another thing that we can do is facilitate hard discussions. So many HR leaders try to head off conflicts by giving workers opportunities to openly discuss topics that are of importance to them. So, as an example, I wish this were a discussion because I'd love to hear from you all. And maybe at the end, we'll have an opportunity to hear from some of you. But many companies are using employee resource groups to facilitate constructive conversations among people who already have a shared experience. So it could be a group that's focused on women or single parents or a group of employees who have disabilities. So, what makes those a safe space is that they're a group of colleagues who already have a common ground, yet they may not agree with one another when it comes to different topics, but they consider that a safe space. So, I'd be curious to know how many of you all have employee resource groups and are working with those. Another example to encourage conversations is what Dick's Sporting Goods did. And I like what they called their program. They called it dialogue circles. And what this did is they brought employees together in small groups, whether it was online or in person, and it was led by a facilitator. And they had conversations on topics that historically would have been taboo, like things that you just do not talk about at work, like gun control or racial conflict. So hopefully your wheels are starting to spin and you're thinking, what could we do at our company? And like I said, if we have time at the end, I'd love to maybe open it up just for a few brief comments to discuss what some of you are already doing at your company. The third thing that you can do to spark civility is to emphasize your core values. Take every opportunity to remind your workers about your company values. So, whether it's respect, teamwork, inclusion, collaboration. Also, you want to remind them what are your requirements for civil and respectful behavior. And so earlier, we kind of alluded to this, but everybody comes to work with this invisible suitcase, and it's packed with things such as, where we grew up, our religion, what kind of family we're from, what's our neighborhood like, what are our political views, our education. And those are all things that can make for a very healthy workplace. But in order for that to be the case, for it to be a healthy, good experience, people have to be willing to understand where somebody else is coming from. And so this has to be taught. We need training around this. Also, we want to emphasize our core values in our newsletters, company-wide emails, on your intranet, and even throughout the office. And again, I can't see you. I don't know what you all look like, but if some of you all started working, maybe back in the 90s, early 2000s, you remember seeing those posters in someone's office with a beautiful, scene with a mountain, and then it said, courage or teamwork. Well, it's because employers wanted people to be reminded of what their core values are. And today we, have jazzier ways of doing that. So we can use our digital signage in our offices. That might be a great way, a visual reminder to show people what are our core values. And finally, we want to know the law and clarify our policies. So, of course, it can be tempting to tell workers, like, we're not going to talk about politics and religion at all. But is that a realistic policy? Probably not. So, it's recommended that if we don't already have a policy in place, we want to craft one that talks specifically about what is acceptable speech in the workplace. What are the limitations? What about social media? Can employees post on their own social media page about political topics? And are there any instances in which this could violate an employer policy? Let's say if the speech is maybe discriminatory or harassing. So once your policy is created, you need to instruct your people managers, get them familiar with the company policy, and spell out what happens when an employee maybe crosses the line. Also, you want to be careful because each region, each state has different laws regarding what to put in those policies. So really educate yourself before you craft your policy. You might, turn to some resources, use an attorney, but having a policy in place can definitely protect your company. And then finally, once you create your policy, conduct training, not only for your managers, but for all employees. So now we are going to hear from you. Out of curiosity, we want to know, did your company proactively prepare for difficult conversations, specifically about the election? So very curious to hear what you would say. So we're going to launch a poll.
I'm in the process. Sorry.
Okay.
There we go. I'll give you a few seconds here to reply. All right. I'm going to end the poll, share the results. So
Okay.
resounding no for the most part. I like that there was some somewhat.
Yeah, this is interesting. Last week, we were on a call on Friday, and we talked a little bit about what employers were doing or had done that week, just to even help employees manage the emotions and feelings that they were having, particularly last week. And to no surprise, most employers really didn't do anything. But so many people were saying they wish that there was just something, some outreach to let them know that it was okay to be feeling a certain way. So all of this to show that there's work to be done. We still have so much to do in this area of addressing the needs of our employees and to make the workplace feel like it's a place where we can have these conversations and bring our whole selves to work. So now we're going to transition a little bit. We've talked a lot about what we could do as, HR leaders, managers, senior leadership, but now we're going to move more into our individual responsibility when it comes to creating a more civil and more respectful workplace. And this is the fun stuff, and hopefully you think so too, because it really um, calls for us to be a little bit more introspective, looking inside, doing some self-reflection. So when most people think about emotional intelligence, they think about Daniel Goleman, and he wrote this wildly successful book in the 90s. And it had to do with emotional intelligence. And we talk a lot about recognizing our own feelings so that we can manage our emotions, manage our behaviors. But for our discussion, we're going to use Reuven Bar-On's definition, and which he says that emotional intelligence is really a set of skills, um, interrelated emotional and social competencies, skills that determine how effectively we understand and express ourselves, how we understand others, relate with them, and cope with our daily demands. So I don't know how many of you all have ever taken an emotional intelligence assessment, but EQI is a self-assessment that assesses your engagement with 16 different skills of emotional intelligence. And it's a great self-awareness tool, and it's used heavily in teams and also in leadership coaching. So even though today you all don't have the assessment in front of you, you're going to be able to assess yourself in 3 different areas. And again, it's a self-assessment. It's not something that anybody else is going to do for you. Um, or, it's up to you to report on how you feel that you're doing with these skills. So the 3 areas that we're going to talk about today are uh, impulse control, empathy, and self-awareness. So let's start with self-awareness. Self-awareness really is our ability to recognize and understand our own emotions. This includes the ability to differentiate between even subtleties within our own emotions while understanding the why. Why are we feeling a certain way? And how those feelings impact our behavior, our thoughts, our actions. So we're going to do a little exercise. If you would, pull out a piece of paper, and some of you might have done this exercise before. It's called an emotional inventory. And just want you to write down on the piece of paper what you're feeling right now. And you're writing down an emotion, and many people, kind of start with, you know, happy, sad, but maybe think a little bit deeper. Are you excited about something? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling um, insecure, angry? Now, write down what's contributing to this emotion that you're feeling right now. And then finally, write down, what does this feeling look like or sound like to other people around you? So, to give you an example, each day, if you're traveling into work, most of you may fight through traffic. And before that, you might have been fighting with a toddler or a teenager to get out of the door to go to school. Or you might have been dealing with an elderly parent. You name it. But guaranteed, all of those feelings and emotions that we experience, they come with us. So doing this exercise of writing down your emotions and being aware of them can really help us throughout our day. And so I'd encourage you, if you've never done this exercise, for maybe the next 2 weeks, take an emotional inventory of how you're feeling 3 times a day. And maybe you'll set a timer on your watch or your phone to do that. Because the more you think about how you're feeling and why you're feeling this, it can help you to think about your behavior and your actions related to that. So we're going to keep looking at emotional self-awareness. I'm going to put up all of these at the same time. And so for each skill that we're going to evaluate, we're going to think about engaging with this skill. Do we engage with it low, mid-range, or high? So when it comes to emotional self-awareness, if you score yourself low on the assessment, it indicates that you're ignoring your emotional needs and your motivations. You might be surprised by others' reactions and emotional states. That's probably happened to all of us sometime, where somebody says something and we're thinking, well, why are you feeling that way? But if that's something that you do all of the time, that you might consider yourself engaged with this skill low. Mid-range, that's always going to mean sometimes. When you pay attention, then you generally know what you're feeling and why, but you might not take the time to consider your inner self too often. And then finally, high, that means you're very in tune with your feelings, why you're feeling them, and you have the ability to differentiate from one feeling to another. Also, I wanted to say something about low. If you have too little self-awareness, it might mean that you could have social awareness within a personal relationship, maybe someone that you're close to, but when it comes to maybe a work team, maybe you have lower curiosity. You're not very in tune with their feelings or your own feelings. So now I want you to take a minute and just write down, do you think you engage with emotional self-awareness, low, mid-range, or high? And if you're still thinking, I'm not really sure, some questions you might ask yourself are, do I pay attention to how I'm feeling on a regular basis? Am I aware of the impact of my mood on others? Do I recognize when I'm upset? Those are just some questions that might help you to think about, would you rate yourself low, mid, or high? And the beauty of this is nobody can see your answers. So now let's talk about some tips. How can you use your emotional self-awareness? Well, we can start by recognizing and acknowledging people for being aware of what they're feeling. So if someone's feeling a certain way, pay attention to how they're feeling. Since we're talking about work, if you're in a meeting, pay attention to people or topics that maybe trigger you and what emotions are triggered. I'll tell you a little story. This morning, I was reading something and I started to become frustrated. And then I'm also trying to get my son out the door, and I could notice that my tone was reflecting that I was frustrated, and he had done nothing wrong. And it was just in that moment, I sensed it. And it was, I don't know, maybe today because I was doing this course, it was just so clear to me that, wow, I really need to pull back and change my tone because it had nothing to do with him. So being aware of our own emotional triggers, we can better manage our reactions, especially when sensitive topics arise, maybe in the workplace. Self-awareness also encourages us to think before we speak, before we post online. It can prevent us from maybe saying something that would be potentially hurtful or even inflammatory. And finally, those who demonstrate self-awareness, regardless of their role in a company, whether they're a leader or an individual contributor, you really set a positive example for others, showing how to handle disagreements respectfully, how to be more civil. So if you found that you scored yourself low, maybe you can, think about some of the tips that we talked about. And keep practicing it, because emotional intelligence is a practice. It's something that we have to keep doing. All right, now let's talk about our second skill, and that's impulse control. And so impulse control is the ability to resist or delay an impulse or temptation to act, and it involves avoiding rash behaviors and decision making. So it's pretty self-explanatory. So now let's talk about What does it look if we're engaged with this low, medium, or high? So low might be described as someone who's lacking in self-control, rash, hot-headed, impatient, over-talking. Someone who's mid-range means sometimes they have the ability to hold back, filter their responses, decide against an impulse to act or speak. And then someone who's engaged with this high, on a high level, they often effectively can delay their impulses, which in turn allows for more carefully made and better decisions. So again, some questions you can ask yourself. Do I become impatient easily? If another driver cuts me off, do I pursue them? Do I make gestures at them? Have I thrown something in anger? Those are just a few questions that you can think about. Do that self-reflection, and then take a second and write down if you think that you are low, mid-range, or high. So some of the tips, what can we do to get to more of the mid to high level? We can resist the urge to always be one of the first voices to jump in to share or to offer an opinion. And for those of you who like to talk personality, Myers-Briggs, or others, that's something else that I really enjoy talking about. But for extroverts, that's something hard. We have to constantly work at holding back and not wanting to be the first one to contribute, especially in a work meeting. So I try to use that count to 10 technique. Sometimes I sit on my hands, but really, if you're in a meeting, try to count to 10 and not be that first person who always wants to share. Let somebody else do the talking. That's a big part of impulse control. Also, what about your resting face? Work to keep your body, your face, and your gestures from communicating your feelings. And when a conversation becomes stressful, sometimes we have to remove ourselves, take a breath, do some deep breathing, and give ourselves some time to pause and reflect. And when we do that, it really gives our brain some time to carefully think about, okay, what words do I want to use? What do I want to say? We can ask ourselves, what would expressing my thoughts and feelings contribute to this situation? And how would it affect my relationship right in this moment? So again, here's some tips that we can use in our personal and professional relationships. So now we're going to do another fun poll. Again, very introspective. Nobody's going to see your answer. But how would your colleagues describe you when under stress if you are not around? Would they say that you're short-tempered, irritable, angry, sarcastic, even-keeled, quiet, pensive, maybe something else?
Just give a few more seconds here. All right, last call. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll and share these results.
Okay, so how does this break down?
A
All
lot of
right.
even keeled, a lot of even keeled, which is good.
Yeah. Now, some people said irritable, sarcastic. Um, yeah, I think all of us um, can display any one of these emotions, but do we have a tendency? Do we lean one way more than others? So that's just a good question to ask yourselves. How would others describe me? All right, so now we're going to talk about our last skill. And this is one that we hear a lot about, especially nowadays, empathy. And really, empathy is described as recognizing, understanding, and appreciating how other people around you feel. It involves being able to articulate your understanding of another person's perspective and also behaving in a way that respects others' feelings. So what does this look like? Low, mid-range, and high. So if we're engaged with empathy on a low level, it might appear that we're inattentive, inhumane, selfish, self-centered. If we're mid-range, it might again mean sometimes we have sporadic attention to others, and sporadically tend toward careful, focused attention, but only on certain people. So again, it might be that we're more empathetic with people that are close to us, but if we're not close to someone, then maybe we're not as empathetic. And then finally, if we have a high level of empathy, it means we're aware of, concerned, and very sensitive to other people and their needs, which results in compassion and active listening. So go ahead and rate yourself on low to high. Okay, and here's some tips for us, especially in teams. Since we're talking a lot about work, we can, to engage empathy more, we can routinely ask and pay attention to how others around us are feeling. Express curiosity and concern for other people. Another thing that we can do is think of someone, maybe it's a former boss or it's a family member who you would consider who is empathetic. So maybe we can do that for a minute. Think about someone that you know, and you would say that person is just so empathetic. What are the character traits or attributes that you think of when you think about that person? What made them empathetic? And so when you think about some of those characteristics, are there things that you admire about that person that you can imitate? Are there qualities, things that they did that you say, you know what, that's a really nice thing to do? And so that's, again, a way to kind of engage our um, level of interaction with this skill. How can I become a little bit more empathetic in my day-to-day life? So that was really a crash course on just 3 of 16 emotional intelligence skills. And imagine that if all of us started engaging with all 16 skills, how much more civil, how much more productive our workplaces could be. And we can remember going back to my, employee that I was working with, it seems like common sense, but it's a practice. It's something that we have to work at all the time. So now let's talk about what are some things that you can do even sooner rather than later. Well, if you're an HR person or you're part of senior leadership, work together, work with your company's leadership team. Create a policy, a workforce policy that talks about civility in the workplace. Also, as it relates to what type of things people can say in the workplace regarding sensitive topics, maybe about politics, religion. Then educate your employees. What are your core values? Remind them of your core values often. And then can you create voluntary opportunities for difficult conversations? We talked about some of the examples about what some of the other organizations are doing. What are some things you can do in your own company? And then practice emotional intelligence. That's something that each of us can do to contribute toward a more civil, more respectful workplace. And then also you can conduct training. So you can conduct training on unconscious bias, you can conduct emotional intelligence training. There are lots of opportunities that you can bring training to your organization. Now, since we do have a few minutes, I said earlier that if we did, I'd love to hear about what some of you are doing in your companies or what you've done already. So you can maybe type this in the chat, or if anyone is willing to maybe raise your hand and come off mute. If you had something to share that you think that we could benefit from to hear what your company is doing to address civility in the workplace, we'd love to hear from you.
And if you do raise your hand, I have a function to allow you to talk. We'll see if it works. So if you do want to raise your hand and speak to the group, you absolutely can. Also, chat is a great place to, type in any comments that you might have, any examples that you can share with us. All right, I am going to go ahead and let's see, we're going to allow Dee to talk. So Dee, you are on.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know how to get my video on.
That's
Um,
okay.
okay, but I'm here though. So I'm actually a sergeant with the Chicago Police Department, and I took it upon myself to start a suggestion box, and it was anonymous. And when we'll have roll call, if any of the troops will have any concerns, whether good or bad, or whether they wanted to give props, I had sticky notes and a pen, and then they'll be able to write down their concerns, and then I will then go ahead and take it to my lieutenant, captain, and or commander to see if we can go ahead and effectively deal with their concerns, or even if they might have ideas, maybe we can go ahead and implement that into the day-to-day operations. So I thought that that was pretty cool, just giving people the space to open up to, be themselves and not feel afraid to give us good constructive criticism, or just constructive criticism on how we can make the workplace more safe. And yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. Thanks for sharing. That's a great suggestion.
Thank you so much, Dee. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what, what seems like a small gesture or, a little bit of time out of your day to start giving some more thought to this topic and taking action on it. It's so, interesting how, ultimately that can really, really help to facilitate this type of conversation and really foster, an environment where people do feel comfortable to bring things forward and know that they're going to be heard.
Absolutely. Something simple, very simple, could be starting your team meetings off with an icebreaker. So sometimes some of these suggestions might seem very forward and like, oh, wow, my organization would never go for something like this. But if you're a manager, could you just start your team meeting off, your weekly call, with an icebreaker? Get people talking about something that's important to them and see if you can create a space where, again, people feel safe, but they also feel heard. So it doesn't always have to be something so large, but something small can go a long way. Anybody else? I know last week when we were on the call, like I said, people wished that there was more of a forum for people to talk about how they were feeling at work. So if nothing else, this can get us thinking about ways that we can bring this to our own workplaces. Now, I can't see the chat, Lauren, so please feel free to tell me if there's anything.
No comments in the chat at the moment. And
Okay.
there was someone who raised their hand, but then they unraised it. So I don't want to call them out. So, oh,
Okay.
I got a hand.
Okay.
So Elizabeth Chambers, we'll bring you online here.
Oh, oops, sorry. Let me go back
Okay,
here.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, a few years ago, we started using an emotional intelligence quiz that we give to all of our prospective, leaders that we're looking to hire, and we send it to everyone that is a consideration. And it has got some wonderful questions. So if someone does have a blind spot, it tells you how to draw that out. Are they aware of it? Are they admitting it? And it has really helped us, because what we did is we went in and we ranked all of our GMs, and this is what we're looking for. This is what's going to be successful. And it has not failed us. And I tell you that the emotional intelligence quiz can help you out so much in the interviewing process. And we're rolling it out. We started with our general managers. We rolled it out to our assistant general managers and our directors of sales, but we haven't to the rest of the team yet. But it does help. If that
Wow.
makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it
does.
does. It does. Thank you for sharing that, Elizabeth. I have not seen many companies who are using EQ on the hiring side, because a lot of people are using it, like you said, with their leadership team. So if you don't mind, Elizabeth, my follow-up question would be, once people take it, do you have some mechanism where there is follow-up?
Yes. In fact, the company that we use, we sit in on a call with them, and we go through that first. Now, it will not disqualify anybody from being hired, but what it does is that it gives us the questions to draw out those blind spots. Now, we also use it for, I've got my LEAP team, which are my future leaders. They all took the EQ, and then had a session with our professional trainer who actually outlined their blind spots with them and gave them some exercises so that they could work toward it. So we use it both ways.
Great, great. That's great to hear. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for sharing that with
Thank
us.
you.
And does anybody have any questions about anything that we talked about today? And if not, then I will turn it back over to Lauren.
Yeah, I was just going to say I can give you, a little bit more information about how we're going to close out today. But if there are questions, you've got the chat. You can add them to the chat. If you'd like to raise your hand, I'll keep an eye on that while we, share our last few moments together. But I did want to, thank Aisha for putting together such a great presentation. She's really, just scratched the surface on all of the different, aspects of emotional intelligence. But I think these three that we've gone over today are just, really useful and impactful as we all look to, foster more of a respectful workplace and kind of deepen workplace civility. And, if there is anything that we can potentially help you with here at Next Level Benefits, like I said at the top of the call, Next Level Benefits is our name, but we are experts in HR across all functions of HR, not just benefits. And, Aisha is available for all sorts of special projects, but particularly related to some of the things that we talked about today. So if there's any help that you might need in some of the ideas that we've given you, and you could use an extra hand or a sounding board, or even have someone just, kind of help you build some of these things out, we're here for you. We're happy to help. Our contact information is up here on the screen right now. My email address is there. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Always looking to connect with all of you. Myself and Aisha, even though we're doing consulting work now, our backgrounds are, we're former corporate HR professionals. We spent many decades in the same seat that you're in. And, now we're on the consulting and contracting end of things. And, we're available to kind of help in any way, shape, or form, even if that is a 15-minute quick conversation just to throw out some ideas or get some ideas from us. We're happy to do that. So feel free to reach out. My email is lauren@nlbenefits.com. If you have an opportunity to check out our website, we would very much appreciate that. It's nlbenefits.com. And of course, you can follow us on social, on Instagram, LinkedIn, and we also have a YouTube page where we have some videos out there that help to explain a little bit more about what we do, what those projects look like, and how we can potentially help you. And so if if there's no other questions, because it looks like we are getting a lot of thank yous in the chat, which we very much appreciate. What we'll be doing here at the conclusion of the session today, so later this afternoon, we'll be sending out a link to the recording of this session. We will also be sending out the code that you will need to submit for your recertification credit. So that will be coming in an email as well. And we'll also send a link to our website and some additional information about next level benefits. Like I said, if you're interested in just having an exploratory conversation, we're here for you. If you have any projects that you might need some support on, we are here. And if there is anything that you heard today from Aisha that you would love to learn more about, certainly let us know. We're happy to set up additional time with you, and are also looking forward to hearing your feedback. We'll be sending out a survey as well. So we really hope that you have an opportunity to complete that. So thank you, everyone. And Aisha, thank you again for such a wonderful and powerful and insightful conversation with us today. And thank you all of you for spending some time with us here on this Friday.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It was great being with you. Happy Friday and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.